Have you ever been in the middle of an interview and just sensed that it wasn't going well? Maybe you weren't answering questions as efficiently as you had hoped, or maybe you got into the middle of the interview and realized that this position just isn't a good fit for you. Well, if you're in that situation, here are some things that you can do in order to still get value out of your interview, or maybe even potentially turn things around. Now, I do want to offer the disclaimer that identifying the point of no return in your interview can be difficult. There are a lot of interpersonal dynamics at play in these types of situations. But if you know that, hey, I'm going to walk away from this interview and probably never speak to this person again anyway, here are some things you can do to, like I said, still get some value out of the interaction. Let's dive into it. If you're hoping that your interviewer or hiring manager is going to take the bold step of providing you feedback in interview, it can always be helpful taking that first bold step yourself by leading with transparency. You have to remember that an interview can be awkward and nerve-wracking both for the interviewer as well as the interviewee. Not only that, but providing feedback during an interview opens up risk for the interviewer because a candidate can always raise a discrimination claim if they know why the interviewer is not selecting them for a position. And so that's why you'll see a lot of hiring managers and interviewers avoid providing feedback in the first place. But if you know that you are not going to be selected for this position, most likely, and you're looking for that feedback, you can always disarm the conversation and increase the likelihood of the interviewer providing feedback by leading with transparency and saying something like, hey, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time to interview me today. Based on the conversation that we've had and some of the skills and experiences that you're looking for, I realize that I may not be the strongest candidate in the running for this position, but I'd still love to ask you a few questions if you're open to it. Now again, this really disarms the conversation, it sucks some of the pressure out of the air, and it turns the tone of the conversation from one of interviewing to coaching. And this can really help increase the likelihood of getting some meaningful feedback from the interviewer. If you're not sure exactly where the interview went wrong, but you just get the strong feeling that, hey, this is not going well, you can always ask the hiring manager or interviewer an open-ended question. And that may sound like, what do you think are some of the biggest gaps or concerns that you see when it comes to my experience and fit for this role? This allows the hiring manager or interviewer to really take the conversation any direction that they would like. Now, I do want to put a caveat when asking this question, which is if you decided to lead with transparency by stating, hey, I realize I may not be the strongest candidate for this position, then you're asking this question purely for insight. But if you did not open up with that disclaimer, then you have to be ready to address whatever shortcomings the hiring manager or interviewer raises. Otherwise, you are implicitly agreeing that their perception is reality and that you may not be the best fit for this role. Now, if you can successfully address some of the gaps that they call out, you can then turn the tide and potentially put yourself back in the running for the position, but always be cognizant that that dynamic is a possibility. So always be prepared if you're not going to lead with that transparency and that disclaimer up front. If you know you're qualified for the position, but realize that you may have missed the mark on a previous important question, or maybe you just didn't summarize your value proposition in a specific domain efficiently, then you can always ask the hiring manager or interviewer for assistance. Now, I want to make it clear that this is a scenario where you probably do not want to lead with transparency by adding the disclaimer up front that you may not be the best candidate in the running for this position. Instead, this is a scenario where you know you're qualified, but you realize that one of your answers just didn't resonate with the hiring manager in a particular domain. And so you want to revisit that conversation. So one way to do this is by stating something to the effect of, hey, when we were talking about some of my data analytics skills previously, I know I'm qualified, but I realize that I may not have addressed the question that you were asking specifically. Could you provide me a little bit more context into what you're looking for and any gaps that you may be concerned about when it comes to my experience and the fit for this role? Now, again, this helps you home in on a specific subject that you're probably prepared to talk about. And so in that way, this question is a little bit safer than the previous question, which is completely open-ended. But the caveat that I will add here is that you want to make sure that you are homing in on the subject matter that is of the greatest concern to your interviewer. Otherwise, this could backfire. For example, if you're applying for a director position, but you don't have leadership skills or experience, that is probably going to be the most important and pressing question in the interviewer's mind. But if you turn around and ask about a particular tool that the company uses that you don't have experience with, and that's the question that you decide to double back on, then your interviewer is probably going to come to the determination that you're not in tune with the requirements of the position that you're applying to, and that could really backfire on you. So if you're going to take this approach, make sure that you are focusing the conversation on skills that are most relevant and that are of most concern to your interviewer. If you know that you'd love to work for the company at some point in your career, whether that's for the position that you're interviewing for now or at some point later down the line, it can't hurt to ask for a continued connection, whether that's with the interviewer themselves or with someone the interviewer is willing to recommend you to. And this is a good question to ask, quite frankly, whether you think the interview is going well or not. Now, if you think the interview is going exceptionally well, you may want to ask a slightly different question, which may teeter on the line of, hey, could you connect me with someone in your team? I'd love to learn more about some of the challenges you're facing today and how I can really start adding value as soon as I come on board. But if you think that your interview is maybe not going the best, but you still want to maintain some connection, you can ask something more along the lines of, hey, listen, whether or not I get hired for this position, I'd love to stay in contact with you or someone on the team. I just love the company and some of the work and challenges that your team is tackling, and I'd love to end up here at some point in my career. This question is, again, very disarming. It's always important to put that caveat in there that, hey, whether I get hired for this position or not, and you can phrase that different ways, but it's always important to put that in there because from an interviewer's perspective, turning someone down and denying them for a job, especially when you know they need it, can be awkward. And then on top of that, to keep in touch with that person later down the line can be even more awkward. And so showing that you will hold no grudge or malice against them for whatever the business decision may be is important as you're asking for that continued support. Now, also, the other important component of this question is, can I keep in touch with you or someone in your network, someone who you could recommend me to? Now, your interviewer may not always be the decision maker on the team. They may not be there 2 years from now. And so it's always good to just branch your network out and seek advice, counsel, mentorship from anyone who is in a position of influence who can help you later down the line. The more contacts you have in your network that are positioned well for value exchange, meaning they can add value to you, you can add value to them, the better. And so always seek that opportunity to grow your network. But also, getting back on point here, if you ask your interviewer for someone in their network, it allows the interviewer to separate themselves from some of that awkwardness if they feel it, while still being able to do something positive for you, even if they do decline you for this position. So don't be afraid to ask for a connection and a continued resource to keep in touch with the company and future opportunities. And then the last thing you want to do is always follow up with grace. Whether you ask the interviewer for feedback or a connection that they would recommend you to within the company, make sure that you send them a follow-up email or give them a follow-up call to express your thanks for their time in the interview and for whatever feedback or connection they may have given you. And that may sound like, hey, thanks for the feedback. I was thinking about what you said, and this is how I think it may help me in future interviews. Or, hey, thank you for the connection. I had a chance to speak with that person, and this is how it turned out. Now, if the interviewer still has not actioned the request that you made of them, you still want to follow up. You still want to keep it positive. And again, just say something along the lines of, hey, thank you for your time in the interview. I'm looking forward to any feedback you may have, or I'm looking forward to any recommendations you may have in terms of people I can connect with within the company to stay apprised of future opportunities and where the company is headed. Always keep the door of opportunity open. I say this all the time. As big as corporate is, it feels like it's just a game of rotating or musical chairs, a cast of rotating characters. You never know who is going to be in a position in your future who has influence over your career trajectory. And so you always want to leave things on a positive note. So that is the advice I have for you today. Listen, I hope you got value out of this video. That is my goal, to help professionals get into corporate, navigate corporate, and turn their corporate career into cash or financial stability and freedom. Make sure that you hit the like button if this content was helpful. Make sure that you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can become apprised of new content as it does drop weekly. And make sure you hit the comment section if there's any content or topics that you'd like me to focus on in the future to add more value to you, the audience. Listen, a career is a long journey to sojourn without a guide. So if you don't believe that you can do better, I'm here to make sure you know better. Upskill professionals, helping you forge a path upward.